Job number J-20255701-2. We're out at the connection to the city main sewer, and we are at about 133 feet on the counter. We can see the sewer flowing by from left to right. Pipe material for the lateral is 6-inch clay. We can see a fine fracture on the Y right off of the city main at 132. And a very fine fracture on the top, a little bit more fracturing going on the bottom. A little bit of a chunk that looks somewhat loose on the bottom. And a small amount of Rit penetration also here at 132. Just some cobwebs there. A small amount of Rit here at 130. Not too big of a growth currently. We stopped all the water flowing too so we can get a better vantage, but there is a fair amount of water pooling, which could be referenced from an earlier video from a prior visit. Just some cobwebs there. More cobwebs. Small amount of Rit penetration at 120. Small amount of root at 118. Small amount of root at 116. Small amount of root at 114. Just some cobwebs there. Moderate root growth here at 110. Currently still appears to be a path of flow, the bottom center of the pipe as we look at it from a little bit of a distance. Secondary section of root growth, some fracturing visible. It gets a little harder to see because the roots are growing in at the fractures. 109 is additional root growth. More roots at 107. Again, moderate growth. Path of flow on the bottom of the pipe. cobwebs. We can see some lateral fracturing here along the top at about the 1 to 2 o'clock position, running laterally from 105. Lateral fracturing continuing. Up to this joint at 104. And we see some root growth at 103 to 105 is the fracturing, root growth at 103. Kind of a small amount. Cobweb. We can see some fine fracturing on the very top at like the 12 o'clock position on the pipe, starting at about 101. Fracturing kind of forking off and continuing through the next section. Lateral fracturing, splintering off into several different places. And it stops at this joint at 97. So 97 to 101. And then we have some roots at 97. Moderate root growth currently with a path of flow on the bottom. Root growth at 93, path of flow on the bottom. Root growth at 91, path of flow on the bottom. Root growth at 89, path of flow on the bottom. Root growth at 87, path of flow on the bottom. Root growth at 85. Still relatively small. Just a cobweb at that joint. Another cobweb at that joint. Remaining root growth at 79. Path of flow on the bottom. Persistent pooling water visible here in this section. We can see it sort of sloshing around as we're moving through. Likely it gets a little higher when water is actively flowing. But we'll let it drain down a bit just so we can see these sections better. You can see as we're going forward here that the water is kind of waving through because it's trapped really. We do have a large spacer head on the camera, so we could elevate it out of this water and see better. But as we're moving through, we do have water that just sits through a large portion here. This was noted on a prior service visit. And examine this section. It looks like the tree roots are behind cobwebs at 81. So 81 is also a small root with path of flow on the bottom. Already noted 79, the footage at 79. See the water still kind of sloshing around as we're coming through all of this. Definitely a lot of persistent pooling. Remaining root at 75. Seems to be a path of flow on the bottom. Wispy roots here at 64, very small root mass, path of flow on the bottom. Small roots at 62, path of flow on the bottom. Moderate root growth at 60, path of flow on the bottom. Again, we still see pooling water here. Very small root penetration currently at 55. Path of flow on the bottom. Small roots present at 53, path of flow on the bottom. And again, as we push forward, we can see the water sloshing around, just sitting around in the pipe. Moderate root at 49, path of flow on the bottom. Bit of a change in direction visible here. Another moderate root with a little bit of root tail hanging into the bottom of the pipe at 46. Another moderate root mass, again with a root tail hanging downward into the bottom of the pipe at 44. Another moderate root mass at 42 with a root tail also hanging down into the bottom of the pipe. Very small root penetration at 40, still pretty well cut back. Moderate root penetration at 38, path of flow on the bottom. You can see a Y fitting joining in on the top at 38, 37. This is likely our building cleanout, so we are now inside of the building at 37. Building cleanouts at 37, city main sewer is at 133. So now we are inside of the property underneath the basement floor. Pipe material is still 6-inch clay. We have a connection coming in from the top at 35. Unknown what it's for exactly. Pipe material is still 6-inch clay within the building. Do have one root mass here visible at 23 with a root tail hanging into the bottom. You can see a Y joining in on the right hand side at 15. Size change in the pipe going from a 6-inch to a 4-inch pipe at 14. And it looks like it's actually 6-inch clay by 4-inch PVC. PVC Y branch visible going up the base of our stack, which has been redone in PVC. access through our 4-inch PVC drain stack.